Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Garden Hour with University of Missouri Extension. We are glad that you are able to join us today, and we have a lot of topics to get through. I'll first show you this map of Missouri and the different regions. You can find your county on this map and then see who your horticulture specialist is. And if you have a question or if you'd like some information, you can reach out to that horticulture specialist that covers your county. And today's garden hour is being live streamed, and being recorded. And if you would like to watch it later, you can go back and watch the whole thing or watch parts of it. Also, a snippet will be made with one of the topics that will be presented. And with that, let's get started. I will turn it over to Zack to give us a weather report.
Great. Thank you, Jennifer. And it's shaping up already to look like a beautiful day across Missouri here. And if you've still got some clouds hanging around, don't worry, they're on their way out and should be pretty short-lived here. And so looking back at our last week here, this is our rainfall, radar estimated rainfall over the past 7 days. And we kind of continued this active pattern that we've seen in April and May. But rainfall totals were a little lower than we've seen lately. And in some spots, you really didn't pick up much rainfall at all here. And so looking at the totals, and these are through yesterday morning here, what we can see is anywhere you see the green is around an inch of rainfall. But we definitely had some locally higher totals in some spots. So looking up to the far northwest in Atchison County, you see that yellow over 2 inches of rainfall. Also a couple spots in south central and southeast Missouri that also got some of that heavy rainfall. But we can see that the rainfall totals were pretty variable over the last week. And we actually see a good portion of northern Missouri where totals might have been closer to a few tenths of an inch during this time. But we did have some additional rainfall that did come yesterday and really through the overnight period. And so this map shows what we picked up over the last 24 hours through 7 a.m. this morning. And fortunately, those areas that did kind of miss out in northern Missouri got a little bit more rainfall during the overnight period. So anywhere you see green on this map is over a ½ inch, but definitely some spots like in Boone County, for example, where we really overachieved and saw some totals up around 1 to 2 inches of rainfall. So definitely yet another active week across the state. And so if we look at where we're at hydrologically here, I'll show our current watches, warnings, and advisories on the left. And with all of this recent rainfall, we certainly do still have some flood warnings around. These are on the Mississippi River north of St. Louis. Even a flood advisory still ongoing in southeastern Missouri here as well. But I also want to turn your attention to our latest U.S. Drought Monitor map that was released on Thursday, May 30th. And there's not a lot of colors on the map here. In fact, all we see are some yellow in south and southeast Missouri showing abnormally dry conditions. But what's great here is we actually don't officially have any drought on the map. And so we don't have any of that moderate, severe, or extreme drought here. And this is the first time Missouri's been, or as a state, Missouri has been drought-free going back to last March. So some really good news with all of our rainfall we've seen this spring period. And so with May in the books here, we can see how we finished out the month. Not a lot of change from what we saw last week, with just adding a few more days on to the end of the month here. So temperatures are going to go down for May. Statewide is an above average month, so a warm month here. We saw those high temperatures at select sites anywhere from 1 to 4 degrees above average for the month. As far as precip, I do think statewide we're going to average above average or a wet month for precipitation during May. But for individual locations, it really depends where you are. So a lot of locations were wet. Some locations here, if we look at our percent of normal precipitation during May, were very wet. In fact, Cape Girardeau finished the month nearly 5 inches above normal for precipitation. But there was also some dryness in the latter half of the month. And so Here where you see some of the yellows from Kansas City over to Boone County and Columbia and up to the Northeast, a lot of spots did finish around an inch to an inch and a half below average for the month of May. So even though we've predominantly been wet, there is some dryness that we've seen here over the past couple of weeks in parts of the state. Looking forward as we get into June, so May was officially Missouri's wettest month of the year climatologically. So during May, as a state, we averaged 4.66 inches of rainfall. There's not much of a drop off once we get to June here. So you can see our Missouri statewide June monthly precipitation total is 4.62 inches, and still a very wet month climatologically. And really in June, we expect for most locations right around an inch of rain per week during the month. And so that's why we definitely want to keep an eye on locations like Northeast Missouri that are a little dry, because this kind of time of year, it's very easy to get behind on rainfall pretty quickly. But looking at the next few days, we're going to have some nice relief from all of the rainfall. And in fact, today's weather is going to be very beautiful across most of the state, and this is just going to continue right into tomorrow. And so if we look at the graphic here on the right, we can see all of that rainfall and a cold front across southeastern Missouri pushing off to our east, and that's going to bring clear skies in behind that front. And so we cleared out pretty quickly here in Boone County this morning. I'd say by late afternoon, the entire state should see clear skies with high temperatures here in the lower 80s. So a really pleasant day. But if you look at this surface chart here on the right, we don't see a lot of precipitation off to our west. And this means we finally get a nice break in the rainfall here. And so going into Thursday, I really expect a beautiful day. So not a lot of cloud cover. Temperatures in the lower 80s as well, but it's also going to feel pretty crisp, and that's because tomorrow we look at our relative humidity values, humidity only in the 30 to 40% range. So even though we're now officially in meteorological summer, now that June has started, this is going to feel kind of like a spring day tomorrow. So great day to get outside if you can. Now, going into the weekend, we do have some additional rain chances coming up, but it's really not for the entire state here. And so showing here some maps that look at some forecast rainfall totals for Friday and Saturday. And this is mainly an event for south of the Missouri River. Southwest and southern Missouri could see some heavy rainfall during this, but parts of Missouri might miss out totally. So if you're in northern Missouri, you might not get any rainfall and just some clouds from this system here. But again, if you're in the southern half of the state, you will see some rainfall, especially earlier in the weekend. And these are locations that have been really wet lately. So we also do have a marginal to slight risk for flash flooding that we'll need to watch where that heaviest rainfall occurs after the weekend. But otherwise, this is really our only rain chance looking ahead at the next week. Looks like Sunday and into early next week look dry and very pleasant. And so here we're showing our 6 to 10 day temperature and precipitation outlooks from the Climate Prediction Center. They actually have Missouri really highlighted in kind of a bullseye of likely below normal temperatures next week. And so very similar tomorrow, we could see some days with highs in the upper 70s to around 80 with low humidity and pretty dry conditions to start next week. And so should be some fantastic weather as we turn the page towards next week. And if we total up all of our precip from the next 7 days, again here, we see over the next 7 days for the first time in a long time, some parts of the state will be pretty dry. And unfortunately, it's this northern Missouri area that we've already seen drying out a little bit over the past couple of weeks. So we'll need to keep an eye on areas that aren't receiving this rainfall. But overall, the kind of calmer pattern is also expected to hang around into later next week with some reduced chances for precipitation there. So kind of a swing from what we've been seeing here in April and May. And so I'll end here by looking at our monthly outlook ahead into June. And just a couple of weeks ago during the Garden Hour, we looked at the official June forecast that was released in the middle of May, but the Climate Prediction Center always comes along at the end of the month and makes one final correction to the forecast. And so this is valid for May 31st, and there wasn't a big change with our temperatures, still looking at maybe near normal or slightly above normal temperatures during June. But if you remember from a couple weeks ago, the original forecast really put a bullseye for more precipitation across Missouri. But the updated forecast has backed off and is really showing most of that precipitation farther to our south. And so we'll see how the month plays out, but all indications are that we could see a little break from our wet pattern here and a return to more near normal conditions. And so that's all I've got for today. Hope everyone's able to get out and enjoy the nice weather over the next week.
Thank you, Zach. All right, last week we had a question regarding a serviceberry tree, and it has symptoms of scorch. And we're going to do a follow-up to that question. All right, so what's wrong with this serviceberry? Well, the gardener that had the question is actually from Kirksville, from my area, and she took your advice and looked at, some of the problems going on with it and discovered that it was bone dry. So those are scorch symptoms, and the plant was actually needing water. The potting mix was not retaining moisture. And what she did was she moved it. She transplanted it to an area that only gets morning sun and afternoon shade, and she watered it thoroughly. And it has not gotten any worse, but it's not showing any new growth yet. So hang in there. Hopefully it will start improving and start putting on new growth. But we just wanted to let all of our participants know that the problem was that the potting mix was not holding moisture and the plant just needed more water, and then moving it into the shade for the afternoon will hopefully help also. All right, and now our next question is, I keep reading about using vinegar to control weeds. Does this really work? And Debbie is going to answer this question.
Yeah, hi everyone. Happy to be here and answer this question. And I see this very frequently when I'm out on Facebook on all the wonderful different multitudes of gardening Facebook pages where people are always recommending home remedies. And the one that I see a whole lot is going to be about horticultural vinegar. And so we have weeds that are here. We see them in our garden. We see them in our lawns. We see them in the cracks of concrete on sidewalk and driveways and gravel drives. So let's kind of look at this a little bit and see what really the truth is about it. So what is horticulture vinegar? It is not your normal table cooking vinegar. The cooking vinegar, as you can see here, I've got it circled in red. It's kind of small. I'm sorry for that. It's a 5% acidity, and that is what is being used when we actually use distilled white vinegar in some of our cooking, or if we're making pickles or other types of food that requires something along in this line. Actually, what vinegar is an acetic acid. And ethanoic acid is also interchangeable with this as well. If it is stronger than a cooking vinegar, for example, 10 to 20% vinegar, then it's going to be considered a horticulture vinegar. We also need to take note that if the carton or the container says that it is less than 8% vinegar, it is not considered to be any type of horticulture vinegar. So it's got to be 8% or higher. And if it is that, it has to be registered with the EPA because it's then considered a dangerous type of an entity that can be used around plants. And so therefore it must be registered with the Environmental Protection Agency. So how does the vinegar actually work? It affects the cell membranes, And what it really does is it takes that cell membrane and it kind of destroys it so that it loses its moisture, and desiccation of that foliage is actually going to occur. It's best to use it when there is bright sunlight. Here in Colombia, I see no clouds in the sky. It's totally blue. So it actually is good to do it when the sun is out and it's a bright sunlight. Also, the results are going to be pretty quick with the dieback of those plants. The thing we have to remember with the horticulture vinegar is that it actually is non-selective. So wherever that horticultural vinegar lands, it is going to affect the growth of whatever plant it touches in some capacity. It is generally used as a foliar spray, so you need to think and remember about that. It's best on annual broadleaf weeds. It does require a surfactant. So a surfactant is another type of a product that is added to some of the different herbicides that allows that liquid to actually stay attached or have surface touching and stay in place with the leaves or the stems of that particular herbicide. So a surfactant with horticultural vinegar is going to be best. Otherwise, it's just really going to run off of that plant. So some other things that we need to look at then is that what are some of the pros and cons of horticulture vinegar? So a good pro is that it's really good on especially our small annual broadleaf weeds. If we use it on any kind of a grass, it will burn the grass. So you just be aware if you're looking at it and trying to do some weeds that might be in a lawn area, it is going to burn the grass and probably kill it as well. It does have the rapid rate kill of about 90% within a 24-hour period. So it's pretty rapid. It breaks down very quickly in the environment, which is good. And then it's also good for weeds in the gravel, a patio, the sidewalk, the driveway. And I had some weeds at my old house that were coming across between the driveway and the street. So that would have been a good location for me to use horticulture vinegar. So what are some of the cons? We have to remember that it's non-selective, so you have to be careful with how you put it onto the plants. The weeds must be small. And that kept in the literature I was reading, the research, that has to be a small plant. 2 weeks from germination is the best time to go ahead and apply this. The roots are not killed. It's only the top growth. And so you may have to do a lot of repeat applications as you continue to watch this. It does drift like any other type of herbicide. So if there's any kind of wind, you need to be careful and not use and spray horticultural vinegar when there is wind for potential drift. Because it's an acid, we have to take careful with how we apply it as well. So any kind of equipment that we might use to put the spray in, anything that might be around in your garden area that's aluminum tin, iron fencing, lawn furniture, garden decorations, masonry of any kind will have some sort of an effect from that horticulture vinegar. It will do some slight damage to some of it and even some more to some of the other types of ornamental, of the hardscapes that you might have around there. You can reapply it every 2 weeks because remember, again, they do like it when the seedlings are very small. If there is a rain event in your location, it's best to wait 24 to 28 hours after the rain in order to apply this for it to actually, using that surfactant, for it to stay onto the plant and to be effective. Some other things that we need to take into consideration is that this is an herbicide. And so just like any other type of an herbicide, there should be some sort of a label with cautions on it. And sometimes they really are good and sometimes they may not be as good as they could be. So things that you need to be aware of is that a severe eye irritation is possible. And sometimes, depending upon if you really get a lot of splash into your eyes, it can cause some irreversible damage. So you need to be careful and wear goggles to protect those eyes. If it is greater than 10% acidic acid, it can burn the skin. And this is a picture of one of our pesticide safety folks from campus here, and that is a horticultural vinegar burn. So you have to make sure that you're using gloves, be appropriate PPE in order to use horticulture vinegar. Because remember, it is an herbicide. Skin irritations can occur. There could be allergic sensitization to it. Prolonged exposure can cause dermatitis, chronic bronchitis. And I don't get this one because they didn't go into a lot of detail, but erosion of teeth. And I'm not sure how that would happen. Hopefully no one's going to put this in their mouth. But I wanted to make sure that you all were aware of this, that just because it says it's organic doesn't always mean it's safe. It just means that it's not made from synthetic chemicals, that it is naturally occurring. And so just as regular synthetic chemicals, we do have to make sure that we're careful with how we actually use them for our own protection, as well as for the protection of other plants in the area. So here's some pictures that I just grabbed from the internet. This one, I'm not promoting any one of these horticultural vinegars. They're just examples. So here's one that has an 8% vinegar. Here's one with 20%, another with 20%, and it comes in a container with a spray, which is really nice. And then look at this one, 45% vinegar. And so that's kind of alarming to me that we have such a high percentage of vinegar that people actually can purchase and go ahead and use. It can be pretty potent there. Notice on a label, all of these should have some sort of a label that's going to tell you the percent of the acidic acid that's in it. It's also going to provide a caution and a danger. And so definitely look to see if there's any kind of suggestions on the PPE so that you can protect yourself. So here is a supplemental information. So this was actually a sheet. It was not on the actual container itself, but it was an additional sheet. It talks about what is the pH of the vinegar. This particular one that I pulled off has a pH of 2.2. That's very low. And if we look at what is the car battery, the acid in a car battery, the pH of that is 0 to 3. So some of our horticultural vinegar is actually more dangerous or potentially more dangerous than the acid that we see in our car battery. But if you look at this, it will tell you what it's made with. This particular one has a yucca extract that uses it as a surfactant. It gives you some additional information here. This one is saying that it's not OMRI, Organic Materials Review Institute, which is the agency that will say if it can be certified organic. It does give you the warning here that it has to be registered with an EPA, and it's giving you here the actual numbers from the EPA, so you know that this has been official as a horticultural vinegar. It gives you use caution, rubber gloves and goggles when handling, use on a calm day to prevent drift, and definitely rinse equipment, any type of a metal, and the area, especially if there's masonry that's been spread, to prevent any kind of etching into that material. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Debbie. Good information. And now Katie is going to talk about what is a spray schedule and how do I use it?
All right. So a lot of times we get questions in about fruit trees that have issues. So the example here actually came to my email this week, and it is an apple that has cedar apple rust. This is a common disease here in Missouri. And in Missouri, because of our climate, we have lots of issues with diseases and insects. You know, we are hot, we're humid in the summertime, so favorable environment for diseases. So many times when I get questions like this about homegrown apples or any type of fruit, I recommend a spray schedule. And so if we have a spray schedule, what is it? What does that mean? So we have a spray schedule, which will be shared in the chat box. But that spray schedule goes through steps in order to prevent disease problems and insect problems in fruit. So I'll go over a little bit of an example of what is in that spray schedule, and particularly for apples, but it also has all the rest of the fruits, all the way from strawberries to grapes to blueberries and all the tree fruit. So here's the example of what is actually in the schedule. So it starts with these tables. So this is for apples and pears. It shows you on the left hand a drawing of what the growth stage is when we apply a certain pesticide to control a certain issue. So for the example, this top one is dormant sprays. So those are applied before the buds swell. So the buds are tight. And we're looking at applying an insecticide and a fungicide in order to control these particular problems. So mites or scales and fire blight. So those are listed there, the material itself, and then also there are some comments. So it could be like in this case, if when it gets green on the leaves, severe plant injury might occur if you apply this. So that's why you need to read all of the label instructions. And then you can see as the plant grows, so we get green tip, which is where you start to see green leaves coming out. And then there's a list of things we're looking to apply. And you notice it gives you options. And these are options that you're going to pick one of these, not all of these. That is another recent thing a question that came in, that a gentleman sprayed all of the things listed at once. And that is not what we want to do. We want to pick one of these and apply it according to the label instructions. And you notice there is a list of these. Those are different active ingredients. And in those, neem is organic and some are chemical. So it depends on which way you want to do it. Some of both, or you want to be all organic or all conventional. You get to choose. And then as we move through the season, there are more steps, but I just skipped ahead a little bit. So bloom, when our trees are in bloom, we are not spraying any insecticides because we depend on those pollinators for the pollination services. We do not want to kill any pollinators, so we want to be very careful with that. And then they continue through the season, and you see that it's petal fall. So that's when the petals are falling off the flowers. And then we change once again what we are looking at spraying. And we continue throughout the season. So that spray guide continues. And these are early season cover sprays. And we also have late season cover sprays. And we continue those at 10-day intervals through May. And then we can extend those if it's not raining to 10 to 14 days, depending on rain, throughout the season to help prevent diseases. Fungicides are a preventative, not a cure. So we can't fix that first picture that I showed. We can't fix what already happened. So hopefully we can prevent it from spreading, and know that, yes, there are certain diseases here in Missouri that are going to be a problem every year. That spray schedule also has this nice handy list of the common name, which is what was listed is the common name. And then they have a list of some of the brand names that are readily available. And then there's some comments about harvest. And each of those labels also will give you what's called a PHI or pre-harvest interval. And that's how close to harvest it can be applied to be safely eaten. And also in that guide at the end is more helpful hints. So dilution table for spraying, also your pesticide safety. So just like Debbie was saying earlier, about reading the label, using those personal protective equipment, and all of the label instructions. And as always, if you have questions about any of this, we are happy to help you with that and help understand it. I have a grower home gardener that came in last year and says, I finally sat down and followed the spray schedule. Now, would you like some apples? Because I have so many apples, I don't know what to do with them all. So we can be successful with fruit. It takes a little work and following that spray schedule. Thanks, Jennifer.
Hey, Katie, we do have a question if you are able.
Okay.
The question is apple cedar rust on leaves the same as cedar quince rust? And how can I keep that from my trees or happening next year?
Yes, there are two different rust complexes. There is a separate cedar quince rust, but a prevention is a lot the same. If you see it on your cedar trees, if you can cut it off, but typically because Missouri has so many cedars, it is extremely hard to prevent it on the cedars or get rid of the cedars in order to prevent it on your quince or your apples. So it is still, even on quince, would be a spray schedule just like with the apples.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Now Pong is going to talk about I see a sick plant.
Good afternoon, everyone. Let me first share my screen. All right. Welcome to ICC Plants. And today we have a relatively easier one for you. So I received a set of photos from my one of my clients. He's a newly established oak tree showing small patches. And when you look at those patches, those leaves are turning yellow, and some of the branches have been kind of like breaking off from the major branch, and those symptoms have been showing in patches across the whole canopy. If you look closer to the stem, you can definitely see some small lesions. They're connected with each other, look like some type of physical damage. And I love how this client took those photos. It gave me a lot of information. So based on these symptoms, I also found a similar symptom, not just on the oak, but also on the honey locust in front of my building. As you can see, throughout the whole canopy, you can definitely see those dying or yellowing branches. So now it's your turn to give your best shot. What could be the cause of this damage? Will this be fungus? Will this be abiotic or bacteria? It looks like fire blight, and insect damage, herbicide damage, and squirrel. I give you 15 seconds. I trust you, you know this very well. I see you guys are voting. Great, I appreciate that. Okay, great. Now, 5 more seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, let me review the answer. Share the result. As you can see, the majority of the voters select insect damage. Congratulations. So this is actually from cicada damage. And of course, everybody knows, especially in Missouri, this is a cicada year. It has become a very hot topic. And in the beginning, we just so annoyed by the noise. but now we have to take all the consequence because cicada they do cause damage to the tree. So the answer for this the tree symptom is insect damage. So regarding cicada damage, what are the damages from cicadas? Some people say, oh, they can stay dormant in the soil. The immature nymph can stay in the soil for 13 to 17 years, and they feed on the roots. So will they cause root rot disease or root injury? I would say rarely, because the damage is not that strong, will weaken or kill the entire tree. On the other hand, most of the trees are well established. Their root system are way much bigger than the canopy up ground. So they may cause damage, or maybe in a certain level of population of the nymphs, they can cause a huge root diseases. But so far, I had never heard about nymph damage on the roots. So the other thing would be, the adult cicada, they have they have the mouth part that can suck on the xylem, and they will suck all the nutrient, mineral, or water from the xylem of the tree. So the adult cicada, the sucking way of feeding on the plant will cause damage. Will that be true? I would say minor. So first, they don't feed on the leaves. Second, they only suck a little bit the mineral or water from the plant, comparing how much the plants need. So I would consider the for feeding from the tree can only cause minor issue. So what could be the major issue that cicada can cause? Basically, it is from the damage derived from the egg laying habit. So how could that be? So basically, the adult female cicadas will, when they start laying eggs on the branches, they will cut through the bark of stems kind of like consecutively, and then they produce those pockets. Then they lay eggs inside of the pockets, and they're gonna go to another branch and continue doing the same activities. According to a report, an adult female cicada can produce those 35, up to 35 lesions on a small branch or twigs. You cannot expect them to make a similar lesion on the big trunk because they're maybe the texture too hard. That's why most of the younger twig are affected a lot. So once they lay egg in the pockets, the egg will hatch, and they will produce the nymph. The nymph will either drop off on the ground by itself, or they will drop off as with the branches, because over time these branches will become yellow. They will be broken off from the major limb. And once the nymph drop on the ground, they will go back to soil, and they're gonna start another 13 to 17 years cycle. So we may see them again in a little while. And regarding the disease management, first, it may be too late to do any protection for the younger tree, since the younger tree are most susceptible to those damages, and cicada damage can sometimes really weaken the tree and even kill a small tree. But on the other hand, for a bigger tree, I would say those type of damage are minor, and maybe also a good way to trim your tree. And so basically, the cicada become your free labor to pruning your unwanted branches. And no need to spray any pesticide, and just let it be. And we just all wait for the end of the cicada season. That's all I have, Jennifer. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Pong. And now Donna's going to talk about annual flowering vines for the landscape.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Jennifer. So I had a question this last week that came into the office. And this lady had received a trellis for Mother's Day, and she was wanting to know what she should put on it that would be quick and have relatively quick bloomer instead of planting a perennial this year. Maybe plant a perennial this fall, but try to plant something as an annual this summer. So I got to thinking about it, and I thought maybe that might be a good question for today's garden hour. So just to review, annual vines are really good because they have quick growth, and they bloom relatively quickly, and they keep blooming. So their length of bloom time is fairly lengthy when you compare it to a perennial vine. And so these can be utilized in many different ways. And so I really like them. And in a lot of cases, they will reseed for future years. And so those are just some advantages to using them. I think one that I really like because it smells so wonderful is sweet peas, and it comes in all sorts of pastel shades, light pastels, dark pastels, pink, purple, yellow, just any, and in white. This is a earlier in the year bloomer. So you need to sow the seeds very early on, like in February or March. It grows up to 6 feet. And if you want to plant sweet peas, you need to soak the seeds in warm water overnight to get them to sprout once they are planted. So a lot of people like sweet peas. Another one is hyacinth bean. And this is one, if you love purple, this one's purple all over. It has more of a greenish purple leaf. It's got purple flowers, and it's got the reddish purple seed pods, and they're very decorative. The vine is vigorous, so you could put it to hide things or put it on arbors or trellises. Like I said, quick grower. And it's also fragrant in the bean family, so a lot of the foliage looks like beans. Grows up to 10 to 15 feet. So you could use this in a pretty nice expanse of an area. Once again, it's one that you're going to have to soak the seeds before planting. Another one that a lot of people like is cardinal climber. And a lot of people like this because it will bring in the hummingbirds. And the hummingbirds are so attracted to the red tubular flowers. Now, this one, I have also seen it in pink and white on the blooms. This is a little different. There's another one that's like it. That's cardinal vine. Cardinal vine has more ferny type leaves, where this has more of a palmate shaped leaf. So the leaves have a little bit more substance to them. Both of them grow about 10 to 20 feet long. This one is very vigorous on reseeding. So put it where you want it, and just be aware that the seeds are projectile. So if you go to collect them, they actually can shoot up to many feet. And so it's an interesting one, especially if you have young kids. It's a fun one, but it will also bring in the hummingbirds. Scarlet runner bean is another one that I've seen planted quite a bit. It has the bean foliage once again. But it has these scarlet looking flowers, and then the bean pods are also a scarlet red color. Grows 8 to 12 feet. And this one, it attracts the hummingbirds, butterflies, and bees. So you can get a lot of pollinators coming in with these. The pods are edible, and they can also be shelled. So it can be a multi-use type plant. And finally, we have black-eyed Susan vine. This one, the flowers look like a black-eyed Susan, but it's more of a tubular flower. It comes in orange, yellow, and white. It is a vigorous grower, 4 to 8 feet, and be prepared for it to reseed itself. But it's easy to, once they reseed, it's easy to take those little seedlings and transplant them to different spots. But once again, it's another vigorous grower that would be really nice for a trellis or an area that you want to have a screen. So that just covers some of the basic ones that you can use on your landscape. So back to you, Jennifer.
Thank you, Donna. And now Gwen will talk about roadside revelations, white flowers you might see as you're driving along the road. Gwen, if you're talking, we're not hearing you.
This should help. How does that work? Helps to
Yeah.
unmute myself.
I can
Okay,
hear you
sorry
now.
about that. So this question came up. I was traveling with a friend, and one of the things that we like to do is just kind of do some roadside botanizing as we go through. And she just was pointing out some of the different flowers, and we saw, now my computer is not working. Let's see here if we can make it go. Sorry. And she was asking, what are those white flowers? And that simple question kind of led into a lot of deeper learning, as sometimes questions do. So about elderberry in the news and seeing things about elderberry come up in social media and such. And she was asking, well, is that elderberry? So maybe in the chat, what do you guys think? Is this elderberry? What do you think? And how would you know if it is or isn't? Any thoughts on that? And I'll let you just kind of go ahead and put that in if you would like. But she's right. This does kind of look like elderberry, but it is not. And I had to kind of go back to my plant ID classes back in college, trying to think about, okay, so what are the characteristics of plants that we use to identify them? And most of our guides are based off of the flowers. Well, if you're driving 55, sometimes that's hard to tell, and sometimes the flowers aren't present, so then you default to the leaves or to the bark. So all of these things can kind of be worked with together to help identify the plant. So here we have our plants. We have rough leaf dogwood, which is what we were actually seeing. And then we saw showed her common elderberry so that she would know what that looks like. And it was kind of like, well, they both kind of have the same flower structure. So at that point, we had to look at the leaves. And you can see that with rough leaf dogwood, you have a simple leaf, which is basically defined as one blade at the node. And the node, if you remember, is where the leaf attaches to the stem. So if we look at the node, you might have to look real closely here at the picture. I know it's a little bit hard, but here's a node here, and we have one leaf at the node. And in this plant, these leaves are arranged opposite from one another, meaning that we have one leaf that is directly across from the other. And there are only a few tree species or shrub species natively that do that. Whereas if we look at elderberry, we can see that this is a compound leaf where here's the node where it attaches to the stem. And we have the leaf that's divided up into leaflets. And there are several plants that have compound leaves, but we can use that to help identify them. And she was thinking like, okay, I see that, but now this looks like Queen Anne's lace. So is this an umbel flower? And so then the whole conversation went into the types of different kinds of inflorescences that are present in flowers. And this led down a rabbit hole that is still generating lots of questions for us. So I thought it might be interesting to kind of share this. This is a diagram that I found from the Master Gardeners of North Virginia. And it just kind of talks about the different kinds of inflorescences that are found in flowers. And basically, what we're looking at are the determinate inflorescences, where the first flower to open is at the top or middle of the arrangement or cluster of flowers, or we have indeterminate, which is where they open, from the side. I went the wrong way here. Or from the base of the periphery. So indeterminate, think of it like your tomato plants that are indeterminate that just keep growing and growing and growing. Well, the indeterminate inflorescences kind of follow that same theory. Whereas determinate, we stop at the end. Here is your flower. And then we'll have another lateral branch. Here's the flower, which will form another lateral branch and form a flower, and so on and so on. The determinate inflorescences are called cymes, C-Y-M-E, cyme. And you can see that there are many, many different kinds here, as well as the racemes, which is kind of the collective term for the indeterminate inflorescences. You can see all of those here. So what do we have with elderberry and roughleaf dogwood? Well, they're basically types of compound cyme cymes. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that quite right or not. I've only read the word, I've not heard it pronounced. But anyway, and I found lots of different sources on the internet that had them categorized many different ways. So I kind of had to go back to my Steiermark Flora of Missouri that was published back in 1963 to kind of get some more ideas on how these inflorescences were really defined. So you can, again, you can kind of see here is roughleaf dogwood with the opposite leaves. And you also have this underside that's kind of a white fuzzy coating. So it looks kind of silvery when it's blowing in the wind a bit, which kind of gets away from the inflorescence, but that's kind of what it looks like. And then the flower that you might see, Cinnamon digitalis or foxglove beard tongue. Also, this is a type of determinate inflorescence called the cyme. And then American feverfew I've seen along the roadsides. I see this more in South Missouri than I do in North Missouri, but I have seen it. And American feverfew or Parthenium integrifolium, this is actually a composite flower, much like our dandelions or coneflowers, black-eyed Susans. So those flowers are arranged, and that's an indeterminate type of flower inflorescence called a head or capitulum. So again, I just wanted to kind of look at this whole idea. Well, what is an umbel then? Well, the plant that comes to mind that's blooming right now is poison hemlock. And that one is a true umbel, and how you can identify it. And it also looks a lot like Queen Anne's lace, only in poison hemlock, you can see these little umbels are kind of separate from one another. Whereas in Queen Anne's lace, those will all be together and almost in a little bird nest shape, inflorescence like a cup in a lot of cases. Poison hemlock is also just a much sturdier, tougher, taller plant than Queen Anne's lace, which is much smaller in stature and more delicate. And poison hemlock will also have these little purple spots on the stem. So the main thing that I wanted to talk about here with this plant is that when you're trying to identify plants, you might not just want to go up and touch them and smell them and do all of the things with them, because you may end up with getting in contact with chemicals that the plants make that could be harmful. And poison hemlock is definitely one of those. So again, I'm going to take a deeper dive into the different kinds of inflorescences and try to give you some more examples about how they are classified. I just thought I would introduce you to this topic and maybe start you on a rabbit hole as well. And that is all that I have, Jennifer.
All right. Thank you, Gwen. And Debbie is going to present our last topic on what is it?
Sorry, guys, I've got it's open on my desktop. I just am not finding it. There it is. Okay, so our question for the day for terminology, the term is called neophyte. Is it a plant which is not native to a geographical area? A plant that has been established in a geographical area for a long time? A plant that can only live in one type of geographical area? And hopefully Jared will put up the poll. Thank you, Jared. So a neophyte. Okay, we got about 10 people who have answered. Any others want to take a guess? Okay, a few more. It's okay if you get the answer wrong. I won't know who you are. And I'm always trying to stump you guys, so. All right. Okay, so I'm about ready. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. And I'm going to share the results. So half of you believe that the answer is actually a plant which is not native to a geographical area. And then 39% of you say it's a plant that can only live in one type of geographical area. Sorry, I had to move the poll out of my way so I could read it. And then 11% think that it's a plant that has been established in a geographical area for a long time. So let's see what the actual answer is. And if you know anything about words and terminology with words, you can take this word apart and you can actually look at it. So let's scroll on. So a neophyte, neo means new, like neonicotine or in the hospital where they put all the newborns in. I can't think of that word. Who wants to help me with that word?
Neonatal.
Thank you. Appreciate that. It's been a long time since I've had a kid, so it means new. So a plant species which is not native to a geographical area, but it's also been introduced into that new area and has a recent history, and that history is generally about 15th or the 16th century. When you introduce a new plant into an area where it's not native, it can be either a great find or it can be invasive. And so I have a couple of different plants here, pictures. And if you follow anything with the National Gardening Association, the Angelonia is the 2024 flowering plant of the year. And that's really cool. It's an interesting plant. I use it in my pots as the attracting one, the tall one that's in the back of the pot. And I have some, I'm glancing at them right now, and they're pink. So they're really, really pretty. English ivy, and we see a lot of English ivy around, and that is considered invasive. We have potatoes, and we all know potatoes have come from South America. They went to Europe and then they came over to the US. So potatoes are relatively new to North America. And then we have the kudzu. And if you're in the southern part of the state, you definitely have this and see this around. I was not familiar with it or had seen it until I started traveling to the southern states. And man, that could be a nuisance. So yeah, that is a definite invasive. So great job, everyone. Appreciate you taking the time to think about these different words and terms. And hopefully I'll come up with something again here in the future for you.
All right. Thank you, Debbie. And now, just to wrap up, we will have future garden hours from noon to 1. And we'd also like to just mention that on June 19th, we will not be having a garden hour, and we will remind you again next week. So mark your calendar and know that June 19th, there will be no garden hour. And if you'd like to ask questions, please submit them at the link you see below here, and we will try our best to answer them. If you would like to save the chat, click on the 3 dots and then click on Save Chat. And again, if you have a question that you would like to ask either by email or you'd like to call the person, you can find your county on this map and see who your horticulture specialist is, and then reach out to them. And with that, we will end here. And again, I want to thank every one of you for joining us today, and I hope you have a good rest of the day.